Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this inaugural broadcast of WUWT-TV, the Skeptics TV channel. I'm pleased to have you here tonight, and thank you for joining us. Our first guest tonight from Washington, D.C., is Senator James Inhofe, and as many of you know, he has been instrumental in the skeptics' cause. Welcome, Senator Inhofe. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you here.
Well, it's nice to be with you, Anthony.
I wanted to ask you about your contributions. Of course, first of all, we'd like to thank you for your contributions to the skeptic community and to fighting some of the disinformation that's been out there with Al Gore and all of the other associated politics around it. Right now, it seems like due to Sandy, there's been a little bit of a resurgence in the politics. How do you see that at this point?
Well, I think the only thing, Anthony, is that Obama won the election, and quite frankly, that surprised me. I didn't think he was going to be able to pull it off. Now, up until that time, if you'll remember, just so our viewers will refresh their memories too, all the way back to 13 years ago, they were trying to get the votes to pass a cap and trade on global warming. It started off with McCain-Lieberman, then it progressed all the way forward to Waxman-Markey. And the bottom line is cap and trade is cap and trade. At the time it first came up, I was in the majority, Republicans were, and I thought everyone said that this is true, that we're going to have catastrophic global warming due to man-made gases. And so that everyone assumed that was true until we found out what it would cost. This is what's important right now. No one has disagreed since, and this has been 10 years ago. It was 2003 when a Wharton group and some others came out and they said the cost would be somewhere between $300 and $400 billion a year. That's a permanent tax it would cost if we did cap and trade through legislation. And so I thought at that time we better make sure that the science is right. That's when I went down to the Senate floor and made some comments about questioning some of the science. I'll tell you, Anthony, my phone is ringing off the hook. People calling up, and scientists now saying how they were expelled from the United Nations, that's the IPCC process, if they didn't already say that they would had made up their minds. So anyway, the bottom line is they cook the science. Well, if you fast forward now, you have to keep in mind that they have given up on passing legislation. And so when this administration came in, Lisa Jackson, and quite frankly, I appreciate her honesty, because I can remember telling her right before Copenhagen, I said, I have a notion. When I go to Copenhagen as a one-man truth squad, you're going to have an endangerment finding so that you can do this through regulation. And she kind of smiled, and I said, when you do that, you have to base it on some type of science. What science will you use? Of course, she said IPCC. And it couldn't have been, the timing couldn't have been better if I had arranged it. That's when Gate came in, and everyone realized that they had, in fact, cooked the science. The thing that is important right now that most people haven't realized is two things. Number one, this president, through his administration, and nobody knew about it until we dug in and found out, during his 4 years, he spent $68.4 billion on his warming agenda. $68.4 billion, and people didn't even know it. And secondly, if we were to do this now through regulation, the cost would be far greater than $300 to $400 billion a year, because they'd be doing it under the Clean Air Act. And of course, that would just quadruple the amount of money that it would cost. So I guess we have to remember that, and I appreciated her answer when we asked Lisa Jackson, you know, if we were to pass this either by legislation or by regulation, would it reduce the CO2 emissions worldwide? Answer, no, it wouldn't, because it would only affect the United States. This isn't where the problem is. The problem is in China and India and Mexico and other places. So even those who are watching us or listening to us right now, Anthony, even if I'm wrong and they are right, still it's not going to reduce emissions anyway. And this cost would be the far greatest tax increase in the history of this country.
That's a pretty tough nut to crack, you know, we can do all of these things, we can regulate it, we can tax it, all these things, but it doesn't seem to have any effect at all in the overall global problem because of China and India and other countries. So it leaves us in kind of a quandary as to, is it really worthwhile? And I understand your position on that. Now, you had a lot of fun with this too, and at the same time, I remember this summer, Bill McKibben posted that thing about the melting streetlights in Oklahoma because it was so hot, and we had a lot of fun with that. You've also had some other instances of fun with this event, haven't you?
Well, Anthony, you can't take these things as serious as the issues are. You got to relax and have a good time. And it was my daughter. I've got 20 kids and grandkids. It was my daughter and her family of 6, stuck in Washington, unable to get out because of the storms, built the famous igloo. And on top of that, of course, they had Al Gore's new home and honk, honk if you want global warming. And so we had a good time with that. But everybody got hysterical about it. And in fact, it was not Rachel Maddow, but somebody on her show who declared, my daughter's family is the worst family in America. Now, that's my daughter, who is a professor at a university, kind of the token conservative there. And she wrote one whole chapter in my book, The Greatest Hoax. If you read it, read the one chapter I didn't write. That's the one that Molly wrote, my daughter wrote, all about the igloo. So the igloo is still well known. Actually, it got more coverage in Europe than it did here.
I recall that. I believe that was said by Keith Olbermann that you were the worst family in the world. He had that worst ever thing that he used to do on
That's
MSNBC.
Right. Now he's not around anymore.
No,
so
no, he's not. He's not indeed. Now, you've written a book on this subject, and the book it goes in depth into all of the behind-the-scenes political wranglings associated with this. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I think the longest chapter in the book is the one on the United Nations. And we did extensive research, and until you read that chapter, you wonder, why is all this going on? Just because MoveOn.org and George Soros and Michael Moore and Al Gore and the Hollywood elites, that group was all behind it. But why was this, what was the motive behind it? And the motive behind it is that, they just want more government running more things. I think it was a professor at Richard Lindzen, the professor at the MIT, who said the ultimate goal is once you control carbon, you control the world. And they want to have total control. Here's the problem they're talking about now, if you want to bring this into today's scene. Now we realize that they're talking about a carbon tax. Well, we can't really compare the cost of a carbon tax with what it would cost on cap and trade, because we don't know the amount of the tax and what they're proposing. It would be a huge tax, and it's just a way of increasing taxes across the board. By the way, most people realize that now with the reorganization and the new Senate coming in, I will be the ranking member on armed services instead of environment and public works. But David Vitter, Senator Vitter, who's going into that position, has said publicly, I'll still be kind of in charge of this issue because this is the thing that I've had 10 years of my life in, and so I'm willing to do that.
So the skeptic in chief passes the baton to Vitter, and that's where we're going now in the EPW committee. Any final words you might have about your book, or if you have a message to Al Gore, who might be monitoring this channel tonight? He's aware of it, we're told. Do you have any messages for him?
Well, I will. He's gone through a lot of tragedies in his life, and it shows you that, I guess it was in the New York Times, they speculated he may be the first environmental billionaire, but it shows that money doesn't buy everything. I think the people are going to prevail on this as they have in the past. Just because Obama won the election and all the far left environmentalists that I just now referred to are going to try to have this as their #1 agenda. Still, I'm going to be there to remind people, number one, it wouldn't accomplish what you want because it would not reduce CO2. And number two, it is the largest tax increase in history. And lastly, getting back to the book, if you read the chapter on the United Nations, this is something that was well planned out, and it's kind of a surprise ending, but no one has been able to refute the conclusions we came to in the book, The Greatest Hoax.
And that book is available. That book's available on Amazon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Very good. Senator Inhofe, it's been an honor to have you here. And again, we thank you for your service to our country and to the world. And we hope that you will continue to be able to provide some guidance in Washington for us in the future. Thanks very much.
We will do that. Thank you. You're doing the Lord's work. Keep it up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. We'll be resuming with the next broadcast here in just a couple of minutes after this intermission. Thank you for joining us.